The most hilarious part of it is that if I do go home this evening and I stand there and tell you I'm unfaithful, that's going to really damage your career.
My career's not damaged.
So I need to start this by pointing out I really like The Traitors. Granted, it is lacking some production quality, which I'll get to later, but it's still a great show with incredible tension, and in terms of group dynamics, there's so much going on that as a therapist I, of course, find fascinating. Anyway, The Traitors is an absolute mess of a show, and I mean that without any exaggeration. This is the sort of thing people refer to as some proper Lord of the Flies shit. Backstabbing, betrayal, storming out the room.
Put my name on that card.
John, no.
Occasional brilliant moments of mind games, but often a wonderfully awful portrayal of just how horrendous group dynamics can become under enough stress. For which I could have hated this show. Let's put decent people in difficult situations and all seek pleasure in how horrible they end up treating each other, except it's not that. Despite the absolute mess, this is also somehow life-affirming and empathetic and human. In spite of all manner of tension, the contestants come out of this as massive friends. It doesn't feel like creating drama out of people's misery, it ends up the total opposite. And we're going to get into all of this, the chaos, the positive sides, and some of what we can learn from their experiences here, so let's get going. So what is the show, first of all? 22 contestants enter a castle. 3 of them are picked to be traitors. Each night the traitors meet up to choose someone to murder, effectively booting them off the show. Also each night everybody sits around a round table to have a big debate and vote on who they think the traitors are. They vote on someone to banish each episode, and once they're banished, that person has to reveal whether they were a traitor or a faithful. And then they basically keep going night after night until the traitors have murdered everyone off, or the faithful have banished all the traitors, and then they win a load of money. Basically, there's some caveats, but never mind. What's really fun, I think, about this is how they all set out with these intentions to find evidence on who the traitors are. They're always talking about evidence here and being logical, like they're great detectives who are going to crack the case and stuff, except no, it all just descends into chaos. Their evidence rarely makes much sense. Most of the time they're just getting swayed by mob mentality or voting out whoever they formed the least close bonds to, because obviously that must mean they're the traitors. If I don't feel as warm to them, that must mean that, obviously. Slight spoilers here. In episode 1 they vote out the woman who has one hand, because when they all raise a toast to the faithful, she doesn't raise her glass. She has one hand, the glass is positioned on the side where she doesn't have a hand. It's only a small dumb toast, but no, the others aren't having that. That must mean she's a traitor. It's not that they all hate Nikki here, obviously, it's nothing like that. It's just they're looking for even the tiniest reason to target someone. When someone suggests Nikki, they all leap forwards to agree because they don't want anyone to vote for them. Instead, just blend in and agree with the general consensus. And while the votes in other episodes are never as unanimous as this first episode, the same actions still repeat. They look for evidence, find nothing concrete, so snatch at the tiniest, minute thing as though it is damning evidence, and then all jump on top of it, and surprise, surprise, the person they voted out isn't a traitor. They've got it wrong again. We'll be more logical next time, we promise. The thing is, it's really hard to be totally objective. We all use objectivity, but we can just as easily use it to argue something illogical and subjective than we can to use it to actually point to the truth. Maddie here is the prime example of this. When everybody votes out Nikki, Aaron is the only person who doesn't vote for her because he honestly doesn't think she is the traitor.
Yeah, I knew she was a faithful the whole long. I literally was telling people, I was like, I genuinely think she is.
As a result of this, Maddie concludes that Aaron didn't vote for Nikki because he must know Nikki isn't a traitor. The only way he'd know is if he is a traitor himself. And if you lose the thread of any of the logic here, don't worry, that's half the point. Because then, in a later episode, when some of the group do start voting for Aaron, it makes him cry. More than just cry, actually, but we'll get to that. Aaron especially breaks down when Wilf here votes for him. So Maddie concludes, why would Wilf's vote in particular have such an effect on Aaron? Well, because if Aaron's a traitor, maybe Wilf is one too, and it's shocking to him because it's one traitor turning on another, therefore both Wilf and Aaron must be traitors. That's the line of thinking, except all of that logic depends on the idea that Aaron is indeed a traitor when he might not be. It's logic that shuts out a dozen other possibilities and contradictions. If you just follow her thread of thinking, then yes, it could make some logical sense, but her mind is still blinkered to a lot of other possibilities, possibly more sensible possibilities. Because for whatever subjective reason, this is the line of thinking she's most keen to follow. This is the one she wants to pursue. I hope that makes sense. But that's fundamentally the problem anyway. When you're so eager to find out who the traitors are, you end up searching for anything that might suggest that. You interpret all information in such a way as to prove this person must be, because that's subjectively what you want the information to point to. Funnily enough, I think the best way to be objective isn't to try and shut out all your emotion. Instead, it's to reflect on your emotions, be fully aware of what you feel and what you personally hope or fear or want to be true, and try to then spot how that might be swaying your opinion in moments. It's what counsellors and therapists have to do constantly. But there's also the way stress has an effect on all of this, which is what we come to next with the events of a certain magician in this show. This will be a slight spoiler as well, but it's the last thing I spoil. Before we get to that though, let me derail this entire video for a moment to let you know it's sponsored by World Anvil. Yep, they're still keen to support me. World Anvil is an online tool for world building, campaign building, character creation, management, good for writers, game masters and participants of said games, from Dungeons and Dragons to all these other ones I haven't heard of. Oh, I do know some of them actually, but I said world building can feel daunting when there's so much to do. World Anvil makes a massive difference, giving you all the tools and features you could possibly need. A lot of different features. The one I find the most fun though is their Chronicles feature. Say you want to design your own calendar for your world, you can pop in all the information, have the calendar generated, then build a timeline of historical events linked to that calendar, or several calendars with all sorts of hyperlinks you might want sprawling to other articles, and then upload a map and link different events to locations on the map so you can easily see where and when everything happened. I find that so handy, and if the timeline affects how the map looks, such as a big city getting destroyed or whatever else, you can add altered maps to reflect those changes. Plus, you can have different timelines running together. There are other features to World Anvil too. I just get a bit excited about that one specifically because my organisation is chaotic at best, and a good 5 years ago I tried to plot out this stuff with my own calendar and timelines for my novel on paper, and I got in a complete muddle, and something like this is just perfect for me. So yeah, I have a link in the description and as a pinned comment with the code TREE, which will offer you 40% off all their yearly subscriptions. Check the link. World Anvil is seriously really good, and you can tell it's made by people who are passionate, right down to touches like this. Look at that. Now back to the video. Tom, who entered as a contestant in this show, is a magician. In his own words, he's one of the best in the world at cold reading, which sounds a bit much. Never make a claim like that on TV, you're sure to shoot yourself in the foot, which is exactly what he does. It should make him brilliant at quickly, easily picking out exactly who the traitors are, except no, he gets almost everything wrong. For almost the exact same reason as Maddie gets things half wrong. He spots evidence of lying and other subtle cues in people's behaviour, but fails to consider these cues might mean something other than them saying, "I am a traitor." You know, he no doubt is brilliant at cold reading, but Tom is used to employing those skills in very limited situations based around his magic tricks. I don't know, like figuring out what cards people are holding or whatever. Situations where you know exactly what the other person is going to try and lie about, and there's no other context and external factors, but that's not the case in this show. They might lie about being traitors, they might also tell small lies to not seem like dicks, they might be conscious of the fact they're on TV and that everyone is scrutinising them for everything. All of that pressure makes them more keen to come across well, I guess. Too keen, perhaps. And it's not just that Tom gets almost everything wrong either. Stress also makes him explode pretty much out of nowhere in this show. The second the finger is even vaguely pointed at his girlfriend here, Alex, his instincts to protect kick into overdrive. He starts admitting to things he shouldn't admit to in an effort to prove his honesty. He accuses people with increasing desperation, then tries manipulating others in odd ways. He says nothing with any persuasive ability. He kind of does not stop waffling for an entire episode in a panicked state of digging his own hole deeper and deeper, and it's painful to watch, really. And I think that is kind of his problem. He wants to be in control of the situation. Being out of control makes him panic, and so he snatches frantically at everything he can do to try and regain control of the group opinion of the situation. There is a story of hubris in it somewhat, I think. Is it also a coincidence the person he accuses the most is the person he feels most intellectually threatened by? I think that probably is a coincidence, really, but I've said it now anyway. What we see time and time again in this show, more than anything though, is very frustrated people throwing up their arms and going, I don't know who the traitors are, this is just so hard, I don't know what to think. And I think that's the general experience of this show for the faithful. Not knowing something that they're desperate to know. Not knowing things is always frustrating in life. It can be scary, it makes you feel stupid, helpless, powerless. As a result, you might be keen to do things that give you some semblance of control and power and not feeling helpless. Kind of like Tom does, or else to jump at the simplest conclusions, any conclusion, anything to spare you feeling like you don't know the answer. Which is what happens. This is kind of why they so often vote out whoever they like the least. I feel less warmth to that person. It's easier to conclude I feel less warmth because a traitor would be more reserved than to conclude I just happen to get on slightly less well with that person, so I'll stick to that logic. And so you watch them rapidly vote out all the shy people, which is a bit sad. Suddenly it feels like playing sports at school where people get picked for teams and whoever is picked last just feels crushed emotionally. People voting out who they like the least, who they want to reject and kick out of their friendship group. There must be some feel of that to this experience. It happens to one such man who even talks about how left out and lonely he used to feel in his school days, and damn, that makes this horrible. Aaron, I mentioned earlier, has a full-blown panic attack when people start accusing him. Yes, this is just a game. Yes, that's how the game works, but it must still feel absolutely heartbreaking to think you've been making close friendships with someone and to come to care for them, only for that person to turn around and go, I don't trust you, I want you gone. If there's anything that makes Aaron break down, I don't think it's Wilf. I think it's John here, who Aaron had earlier been curiously, innocently asking about his work as a massage therapist, showing a genuine interest and letting his ADHD get a bit carried away with the questions. John interprets all of these questions as Aaron doubting John's capability as a massage therapist, which is an odd way to interpret it, really. I'm not quite sure what that says, but it annoys John. Makes him feel like Aaron was grilling him, and because it annoys him, he becomes keen to conclude that Aaron is the traitor.
You were kind of grilling me? How long have you trained?
Not.
Yes, you were.
Oh, no, wait,
yes,
no,
let
please.
me finish.
And just imagine how hard that is for Aaron. There he is, trying to be nice and showing a genuine interest, only to be attacked for it. That must feel horrible. And it goes even further as well, because John interprets this panic attack Aaron has as acting, pretending. He even gets quite vicious.
I don't know what
It's
happened.
a competition, it's a game.
I think I
okay?
literally started
It's a
overcoming
tad
it.
dramatic.
I know.
You should got an Oscar for that performance. I didn't believe.
Are you joking?
Either way, the point is this. Uncertainty is scary, but it's when you're less desperate, less eager to know the answer, less afraid of the general experience of not knowing. That's when you're best able to accurately find the truth. The poet John Keats talked about what he called negative capability, to accept uncertainties, mysteries, doubts without any irritable reaching after facts and reason. The psychoanalyst Wilfred Bion talks about how anyone wishing to find truth must first be able to tolerate a state of not knowing. Enough of me spouting those quotes though. Watching Aaron have a panic attack and then be accused of acting is 100% the most uncomfortable moment in this show. I didn't enjoy that. So what is it then that stops this show from being a horrible, brutal experience of people being friends and backstabbing? And to be clear as well, I think even the idea of this show is pretty brutal. The classic reality format is that each episode, the worst contestants at whatever it is they're doing, cooking, baking, business, get voted off until only the best remain. But here, the best people don't necessarily win. The best people get killed off early on for being a threat. Sometimes the nicest people get voted off for ridiculous reasons. Which isn't to say being ruthless wins it for you here, because that also comes with its own downfalls. It's just to say all of it can feel totally unfair and predictable. Anyone can be kicked out at any moment despite how good or bad they've done in this. In a way, it's oddly refreshing to see a reality show that doesn't feel like it's trying to depict a meritocracy, but quite honestly says sometimes it's all unfair. And in another way, it creates a mess, but one, like I said, that is also strangely life-affirming, because in spite of how unfair this is, in spite of how forced they are to constantly second-guess each other, the people in the show all form really strong bonds. Yeah, partly that's a natural response to how they're forced to backstab and question each other, because you know, how horribly lonely this show would be otherwise if you didn't find people to trust. Their response to that is to try and find people that they choose to trust, and sometimes you do see that as a conscious choice here. But what happens in situations where their trust is proved foolish, where they discover the person they've been close to were actually traitors the whole time? What do then? They immediately forgive them. Sure, they've been worked up and stressed throughout, but then all of their anger washes away and they remember again this is a game, and they say things like, "I love you but you're a dickhead," and hug them, or comfort them when the traitor apologises for betraying them. They even admire the traitors for how well they've tricked and played. I think that's why I like this show. Whilst there is a lot of drama that isn't always nice, the contestants are still always given space to breathe afterwards. Sometimes to go out on these team building challenges where the differences are put aside, or they're given nights off to just enjoy each other's company without any murders or banishments happening. And it's nice in those moments to see them celebrate and to see a level of camaraderie between them. I think reality shows too often encourage people to fall out with each other for the sake of drama. And whilst the format here is built around the idea of people falling out, it also seems to somewhat encourage them to repair fallouts, or else to not take them too seriously. You know, all of the traitors in this show wanted to be the traitors. They opted for that role. They thought they'd be great at tricking these other 19 people they don't know, except very quickly they came to care about these people and then started to feel horrible about what they were doing. The guilt of that started to genuinely weigh on them, and that is quite a nice revelation here, really. How a show all about betrayal comes with such honest guilt and affection for each other. It's supposed to be a show in which a group of people turn against each other and cause complete chaos. Instead, it ends up a show of becoming united, in spite of all the chaos around them. So yeah, this show does have its flaws, like all reality TV shows. There is definitely a part of me that can't help turning my nose up at some of it. And I think the tasks they have each episode can be a bit of a drag at times. I absolutely hate the way they leave cliffhangers at the end of each episode, so you have to watch the next one to see who gets voted out. I also think they too often step away from showing you what's happening in a moment to play a clip of one of the contestants describing what happened.
We found a 2,500 barrel and it was... I can't even describe the size of it.
You know, we could just watch it happen, thanks. We don't need this too often. I think as well, Claudia Winkleman, while she does nothing wrong as a host, I do think she lacks much style to add to this show, though. I think it could do with something like the Crystal Maze, where the host would always ham it up to inhabit a role that fitted the aesthetic of the show. Because they do have quite a strong aesthetic here, I think, this medieval cloak and dagger stuff, but it's only half there. Claudia does nothing to add to that atmosphere, really. Also, the music choices of pop songs remixed to sound overly dramatic, they undermine that atmosphere too, or I think something more in keeping with a tense, stirring medieval feel might be better. Especially annoying actually when the music is mostly just used in montages to pad out the show slightly longer. Like, they could easily cut this stuff and just get on with it. But yeah, all the same, I really enjoyed this. I don't want to get too much into it because I feel conscious this could be spoilers, but let me know what you think. Comment your thoughts, good or bad, tell me what I missed or could have discussed properly. Like if you enjoyed this, subscribe for more, support me on Patreon for even more. A big thank you again to old Anvil, but otherwise, hopefully see you next time. And as ever, a special thank you goes to Janice McMahon, Luke Orr, Treat Chukaba, Michael Gallagher, InSquares, Flying Spider, Samara Salsi, Joshua C. Follier and Chad Bramwell. Thank you.